Let's talk about raid seasons in Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes. So, I've been thinking and talking about this for a while, but it was like, all right, let's finally get this in a video. Let's talk fully about this concept of raid seasons. I hope this is something that we can all learn from, including I hope this is an idea CG can run with, even though I doubt this would reach them. But I think that as a player base, this is something that most of us can get behind, as well as I do really look at this from the side of CG as well, of how can you maximize your money and your development time for these raids as well. So hopefully that will help. And let's just get straight into the meat of this. So current system, I think you guys are all pretty aware. We have a featured raid. That's the most recent raid. That gives the Mark III raid currency. Technically, early game guilds, maybe early mid-game guilds might still do some older raids just because you can still get some Mark II from like Crate and Indoor, but there's no real need for most people to do those. Most of the time, whatever the featured raid is, that's what your guild's doing because you need to earn your Mark III raid materials. And just so you know where I'm coming at this from, I am an in-game player. Mainly, I'm a guild leader of 3 years, an officer of more than that. I am in we're 465 or 68 or 70 mil right now. My main account. My main account is 12.4 million galactic power. My alt account is 9.5 million, and then I have a little mini account that's 600,000. So I've got a end game, late game, and then a super early game account. But I do understand this from an early game perspective. It's not early game, but mid game perspective. I know a lot of people in 200 and 300 mil guilds that I'm able to talk about and see how they do in these raid environments. Anyway, so the featured raid, it remains the raid for about 6 to 8 months. That's about 31 raids per featured raid. So you're going to get to do 31 times. You get the rewards out of whatever you invest in that, and then you don't get it anymore. And yeah, like I said, you could technically do other raids, but not really much of a point. The negatives of the current system on the CG perspective. So this is the mind of the developer. Why are there negatives to the system? You're spending presumably a lot of time making these raids. They're complicated, new backgrounds, new units, new abilities, testing, only for it to be used for 7 months and then never touched again by 90% of the player base. I mean, truly, like that's really what it boils down to. And this is in an era where CG has tried to push us toward evergreen content. So that's galactic challenges, conquest, where all they do is tweak these bonuses and then throw it at us, and that's content to play, right? It's not like you're having to spend some absurd amount of dev time with any of this stuff. And then we've got things like GAC and TW. TW hasn't changed in a super long time. What changes in TW is the size of your zones based on the size of your guild, capping at 50. Datacrons, new characters, counters, and the meta. Same thing for GAC. TB, they've made some changes, added some new planets. Rise of the Empire is not really very old. We occasionally get new missions, some new bonus planets, that kind of thing. But they went ahead and made it for like billions of GP, right? I think the TB is basically, we're going to be doing Rise of the Empire for a very, very long time. There's no goal on their end to change that TB anytime soon. So CG's typical development strategy is let's produce something that will last a very, very long time, and we won't have to touch it. And out of raids, out of all the content we get, that has to be one of the highest development time, the lowest return in terms of play time we actually get out of any of this stuff. So, negatives for the player base of the current system. The biggest one to me is the disrespect of player investment. That is investing Omicrons, Zetas, relics for characters that immediately their value falls off a cliff. And I'm not talking about, oh, I relicated my Drogon for Indoor. Like, Drogon's going to maintain most of his value when the raid leaves. It's a nice benefit. And then Gungans for Naboo is a similar situation. Gungans are a good team. You may not want to take them to Relic 9, which is kind of where the difference, maybe Relic 7, and then you do 9 for the raid, somewhere there. But the best example of completely falling off a cliff, Luminara and Kit Fistu, two terrible characters outside of the raid. When the Naboo raid leaves, I can almost guarantee the overwhelming majority of players will never use Luminar and Kit Fistu again, except maybe throwing him as a 5th to fill the tag requirements in a Qui-Gon Jinn team. I mean, they're just not good characters. They're not going to be using with JML or JMK, maybe not even Padme if you have a Padme leftovers team. Probably get outclassed by Ayla and Clone Sergeant at this point. So You've got characters that people invest in that just, they just suck. And when the raid leaves, it just feels bad to have that investment just sitting there. And you probably got some return on it, but it doesn't feel good as a player to make that investment. And then to have to weigh, do I make this investment? Is the return I get from this investment worth it with the limited runtime of the raid? And then we've got entire factions of older raids like Tuskens. Tuskens are a decent team, but if you missed them for the crate raid, there's not a ton of reason just to go gear them up right now. But maybe if the crate raid still came around, you'd feel more inclined. So that's kind of what we're talking about. But there's also a lot of burnout from having to do the same raid for 6 to 8 months with no variety at all, and just burn out, and then a new one. Hey, exciting for a few weeks, maybe frustrating a little bit too, and then burn out, and the new one. So it's just very tedious as well. And I'm hoping that this would help that, as well as maybe just relieve some tension in guilds that do require forced farms. My guild doesn't require any forced farms, but there are guilds that say, hey, you have to Relic 7 your Plo, you have to Relic 7, or not Plo, your Luminari, your Kit, you have to Relic 9 your Gungans. Like, these things may be easier when it's less limited in time, when you have a more repeatable return on this investment, even if it's small. So the solution, or at least the goals to get to the solution. Main goals out of our negatives that we've talked about. Increase the return on investment for the development time by increasing the lifetime of raids while reducing the impact of burnout. A lot of words, but that's the goal of this raid seasonal model. Respect player investment and incentivize the investment of raid teams by uncapping their lifetime usefulness. Again, incentivize the investment by saying the investment's not going to go away. You're going to spend these Zetas, these Omicrons, this gear, and it's not going to disappear. Another thing that I didn't even mention with investment is raid Omicrons. I think I briefly mentioned the word Omicron, but I didn't specifically say, we have raid Omicrons, right? So once you apply that, when the raid leaves, it is literally useless. I mean, there is, at least Relic and Luminari, you throw in a Qui-Gon Jinn team something, but the Omicron you literally can't use unless you're playing the old raid for just no reason. So that's a really painful one. The solution, like I said, is called Raid Seasons. The reason I'm calling it a season is because we already have Grand Arena seasons. We have that month-long, 4-week-long Grand Arena season. I think we should tie it to that. I think I said clerical reasons on the slide, but managerial management reasons, tie it to that for your timeline, so you're not having random timeline stuff kick. But you can tie it to where at the start of a Grand Arena season, so you either do that at I guess it'd be the first join phase of the next round. So you've got the Conquest Week happening, Conquest Week ends, and then that day sign up start, your new raid season kicks off. And that would just be a good place to tie it. And I'm saying that you rotate the seasonal raids between all the Raid 2.0 raids, so that's Crate, Indoor, Naboo, and then as we get more raids, they'd also go into that cycle. And we'll talk about the specific implementation strategies in just a minute. But yeah, so rotating raids after 4 to 5 runs would reduce burnout, provide variety for the players. It would also allow players to invest in raid armies and gear raid-only teams with the knowledge they will gain a return every time that raid is featured and not just for a limited time window. It will allow CG to develop raids less often and allow the cost of development to drive players spending for a longer period of time. In other words, players are more likely to invest in raid teams after the lifetime of the raid. No one is going to go apply Bausch's Raid Omicron right now. No one is going to apply Scout Trooper's Raid Omicron right now. No one is going to go and gear up, well, not no one, but less people are going to go gear up Tuskens right now because Crate doesn't ever come around, right? Tuskens are a good team, but it's a lot to ask a 8 million player to gear Tuskens instead of going to gear Phoenix or go after their legendaries or their GLs. Tuskens are fine, but they're a passion project for people. They're not going to be something you invest expecting much of a return. But if Crate comes around more often, then maybe those players that were skeptical on, maybe I should gear Tuskens, all of a sudden it's hey, maybe I should gear Tuskens because not only can I use them in Grand Arena Territory Wars, I can also now use them in the Crate raid every time it comes back. So that would push raids more towards CG's evergreen development goal. The first implementation I'd like to suggest, starting at month 1 being the raid release. Month 1, we'd have Naboo. So Naboo is just released in this scenario. Naboo's just come out. Month 2, Naboo. Month 3, we go to Crate. And, this is each season. So month 3, we go to crate. Month 4, we go back to Naboo. Month 5, we go to indoor. Month 6, we go back to Naboo. Month 7, we go back to crate, and so on. So we get 2 months of exclusive running of the brand new raid. You could even do 3. Just be however CG wanted to structure it. If they want to do 3 months or 4 months and then start rotating, either way. And then just slide in an old raid every other month and the feature raid every other month. So the feature raid still keeps the overwhelming majority of the uptime, but every few months you still get to do a month of this old raid. And a month is that's anywhere from 3 to 5 raids, depending on how your tickets line up. So you still get 3 or 5 raids of these old raids every so often, just to mix it up. Because burnout is seriously an issue. I mean, people, the raid, at least in my guilds and guilds I see, the raid launches, and everyone's like, oh, God, I have to go do my raid runs again. It's not become fun after a few months in the cycle. So this would help really reduce the burnout. And again, it would give people a reason to invest. And as you can tell, it's not like a huge cut to CG's bottom line to have a raid run every other month. Right? Naboo is still the overwhelming majority. And again, like I said, you could do 3 months on launch. I don't think that would necessarily be a problem. The second implementation I'd recommend potentially doing would be like a weirder frequency. I think CG's less likely to do this because there's more distance between the Naboo runs, but you'd have Naboo just come out, so you do Naboo twice, and crate, and then indoor, and then Naboo twice, and then crate, and then indoor, and then Naboo twice. I don't like the giant gap between the current featured raid as much on CG's end. I don't think it's something that would be likely to go for, unless they did Naboo twice, crate, Naboo twice, speeder bike, but then it's basically just the other one, but just even more spaced out. So I tend to be partial to implementation 1, even if they did 3 months of exclusivity on the front end. I think just adjust that exclusivity window for however much you need it, and then begin rotating. So whales still get their whale food, right? That's the thing on CG's end that you don't want to take away. You don't want to take away the fact that the Jar Jar event could have only been gotten by whales the first time Naboo came around, and then 2 months into the raid, 3 months into the raid, everybody else has Jar Jar now, and now you can start rotating it out, and that's what CG is going to look at. They're going to want to make sure that the whales that are spending all that money for those characters are still getting that exclusive window of we're doing the best in this activity. So you're not going to lose that. So whether that's 3 months or 1 month or 2 months of exclusivity on the front end of a raid coming out, that's fine, and then start rotating. One last thing that I'd like to touch on, and this is just a fun thing that CG could do. There's no real impetus on them to do this, but if you did adopt this, I think a seasonal reward model would actually be really cool to tie into the fact that we have to change raids every season anyway. Could add a leaderboard thing like we've got in GAC. And what I kind of pictured this was a running total with your personal score for the month, and then it put you in a bracket with a percent of the player base. So if I'm in the top 5%, I'm in Kyber 3 for this month, this season of the raid, and you get some reward box, whether that's raid currency or a little bit of crystals or some Zetas or something. Just, even if it's not a ton, just some extra to give you incentive when you're between personal rewards, your guilds between boxes, just something to compete on a global scale like we have with Grand Arena. I think it would be cool. Like I said, I don't think CG really would want to throw us more resources just because, but I think it would be maybe a more interesting way. We had Grand Arena for a while where it was its own isolated thing, and then we went to Grand Arena Championships, and we have seasons now. Kind of could do the same thing with the raid. As we go into the seasonal model, add that seasonal end cap of, hey, here you go, and that would really accentuate the end of a season in this game, because we've got Datacron sets going away, we've got GAC payouts, we'd have raid payouts, and then if they ever did, this is a whole separate thing, if CG ever did decide to do an actual battle pass type thing, we've seen it before, data mines wound up being the energy packs or whatever, but if they ever did decide to go the route of some type of battle pass in the game, that would be a good timeline to tie all that to. If you just kept the game on a seasonal cycle, that would make all of that easier down the road too, and that's where a lot of games go now. A lot of live service games, not necessarily mobile games, and maybe some, have that seasonal model tied to them. So just its own thing there. And then if you got any questions, thoughts, opinions, things that you disagree with that I should change on here, open to feedback. I am reasonably passionate about this. I think as a guild leader, this is something that I see a really good desire for in the community, in my guild and in other guilds. This would really help with burnout. It would help with, just people wanting to invest in things. It would help CG not have to make raids every 7 to 8 months, just pumping them out, because that has to be a really short turnaround, especially if you're using any exclusive units like we had with Crate. Like, that cannot take a short amount of time to develop and plan for. Uh, I know Indoor was kind of, we all have our own opinions about Indoor, but it just I think that this would help CG not to make the raids as often, because the burnout wouldn't be as bad, so there wouldn't be people going, please give us new raid. They would still be welcome to, obviously, but I think this would help in just a lot of aspects for them and for us. So just let me know what you think, and appreciate you watching. Don't forget to subscribe. We're trying to push to 500 by the end of this year, and I'll see you next time.